hope you found those two presentations as fascinating and as sobering as I did. I'd like to now open the floor to questions, please. Are you all asking yourselves what I'm asking myself? Are we ready for the next commemoration? I feel I've just recovered from 1916. Can I ask Kate, do you think Irish research libraries are ready?
I think the libraries probably are. I think we've done a lot of the core work. We're well known within our own user framework. The people who always use us will continue to use us. I think where we're not perhaps so well framed or well prepared is for people who don't use us. And that's where digitization comes in, and that's expensive and difficult. Leaving aside the expense, it's, as I was saying about the example of the Mulcahy file, it's a lot of the documentation for the Irish Revolutionary period. It's not like that IRA document about Michael Collins. You know, it's a fascinating document. But that's one document in amongst 300. In Mulcahy, it's the same. It's always one document within 300 or 1,000. It's the cumulative nature of this documentation and understanding records in the aggregate. And that's a hard message to get across to the general public, because that's not how they generally encounter documents. In exhibitions, you're shown a beautiful manuscript and you're given some explanation about its history and why it's important, and it can exist in and of itself. Or you're shown a very interesting letter written by an important figure that gives some important information. But a lot of archival information, a lot of archival documentation is not like that. It's series and series and series of repetitive documentation that acquires meaning in the aggregate. So it's difficult material to use, and it's difficult to display. Putting 1,000 pages of a Mulcahy file online is not going to be much use to anybody, and you're certainly not going to be able to download a 1,000-page PDF. So there are a lot of issues, and I don't think we're prepared for them in terms of opening up our access, and I don't think the country is prepared for them, because the things that we will be commemorating are very difficult.
Question here from you.
Question for Della and Joanna. That was really interesting. It strikes me that government should be funding this as much as is humanly possible, because the benefits are so clear. But if thinking about the traditional challenges of collection development with more traditional collections and how hard it is to turn something down or not to accept something, or God forbid to deaccession something, how strict are your criteria for ingest or collection, and have you had a situation where you've had to maybe say no to something?
I think we end up saying no to things every single day. I suppose being involved from the start in 2011, the one thing that really surprised me in a positive way was that our collection development policy, which was written way back in 2008 in the library, actually stood the test of time, and it wasn't written with digital material in mind, but actually the contents of it are totally applicable to the web archive. And obviously the web archive started as a pilot project. In some ways it still feels a bit like a pilot project, because we can't operate at the scale that we would like, and that is of course the big problem with the web. So we can't, though we've made huge strides, and I think the full domain crawl will go a huge way to addressing some of the gaps. I think the gaps will always be there, unfortunately.
Yourself? Do you want to just hold on there for a mic?
I suppose it's more of a thought than a question, but I just thought there was an interesting parallel between this morning's session with Lorcan Dempsey, who was kind of stating that there should be kind of uniformity with sources, particularly online sources and e-journals, and them being available in the online space. Whereas what I think I really got from both your talks today is that the uniqueness of the libraries that you have is both in the physical collections and being able to make them available online. So I just think it's a real interesting parallel between this need to go forward in a uniform direction when what actually makes both of those libraries beautiful is the fact that they have distinct collections. So it's just, do you have anything kind of to say on that?
I suppose the selective collections are definitely conform to that unique just as much as the born digital in some ways, because the web changes so much, so rapidly that, you know, archiving one site one day, it'll be completely different the next. And then, of course, there are different rationales for doing exactly the same site. So I think they both fall into the unique collections in some ways.
And another thing I got out of what Lorcan said this morning was around the need to share things like infrastructure and things like that, but it was still possible to retain that uniqueness in our collections and the things that made us different, and that was okay.
We've two. Arlene?
Like, go ahead, yeah.
Do?
Just thinking about the researchers and their interaction with the archives, and just wondering, have you had a chance, I suppose, with all that you've been doing and tremendous work that you've been doing, to kind of talk to researchers about how they can extract, you know, meaningful kind of information from the archives and that catalysing kind of research piece?
We haven't done that yet, but I did mention at the end there are plans to ingest our web archive content into the repository. So I think at that stage that'll provide the opportunity for that, and that's something that's starting now. Our colleagues are working on it when we can grab some of their time, but that's something that we definitely want to do.
And Sandra, had you a question? Yeah?
I thought it was a great idea putting these two talks together in the panel, because I suppose in looking back at our history from 1916 and the sources that enabled the wonderful commemorations last year, what about when we want to look back at the way that we've commemorated 1916 in 2016? So if we roll forward 10 years, 100 years, I'm just very worried, I suppose, and I know that's why Della and Joanna are working on this, but capturing our history as it's created right now, and all those special collections and unique sources are all going to be digital, and I just hope we're all set for the future on that. It's a huge challenge, isn't it?
It is.
It is, yeah.
Trailing off nervously questions.
And I suppose that's why the pilot project approach is going to be a really good one, because it is such a massive challenge and there's such a massive amount of information, and were you to walk in the door and try and do that all in one go, it just isn't possible.
But
so you have to start small.
Yeah, it proved to us that it's possible.
It is possible and it is doable.
Because the resources that Kate is looking at 100 years from now, we don't know how researchers will want to engage with them and what that'll look at, so we just have to do it now.